Hello everyone, welcome to today's session where we're going to continue our analysis of the poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. And as we have discussed in the previous session that the Prufrock, the speaker, is talking to someone who is his implied listener, who is you, and probably who is his own split consciousness. So this was what going on where Prufrock is telling his intentions, secrets, and his internal and his desires. And I hope that up to now this love song, the irony of this love song becomes clear to you, because there is neither this poem neither contains any love or nor any song related to love, as this poem is not a spontaneous expression of the heart of a romantic lover, whereas this is an expression of the unfulfilled unexpressed desire. So this is what this poem contains. And as we have witnessed the images of modern city in the previous session, in the text we have witnessed images of modern city, the dirt and the squalid conditions of the streets, hotels and restaurants. In the similar way, in the following lines again we are going to witness such kind of images. So here I would like to recall you that allusion to Dante's Inferno. So what Eliot is doing here, he is drawing parallelism, he is drawing similarity between the life of modern city and the life of Inferno or hell with the help of that allusion. So this allusion to Dante's Inferno again becomes relevant here. And before I begin my reading of the text, I would like to connect this text from the previous one, where Prufrock was referring to a visit, where he was referring that they are going to, he and his companion, his supposed companion, are going to make a visit to a room where women come and go, and where Prufrock's supposed lady love is there, and where he is going to make a marriage proposal, where he is going to propose a marriage proposal. But after that, from this line we find that Prufrock pauses abruptly and he starts looking at his surroundings. And what he looks, the yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys. I will read it fully and then I'll explain it. Stepped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. Now here what Prufrock observes or looks or watches, that the yellow fog spreads across the house, across the window panes, the corners, the pools that dry, and the chimneys, terrace, and all over the house. Finally, ultimately, it settled down on the whole house. So this is what he is observing, and here it is quite clear that this yellow fog is being compared to a big yellow colored cat, as the very verbs are used here. I will again repeat this text where you can find the cat, the comparison to cat. Yellow fog is being compared to big yellow cat, which is another example of metaphysical conceit. And what does it mean by this term metaphysical conceit, which I have already discussed in one of my previous lectures, the link of which I have given in the description below. So to resume our discussion, the yellow fog is compared to a big yellow cat. In which terms? In the terms, if you see this text again, then just like a cat, yellow fog rubs, yellow cat, just like yellow cat rubs, yellow cat is rubbing its back upon the window panes, it is nosing, muzzle means nose, it is nosing on the window panes, it is licking its tongue into the corners of the evening, it is lingering, posing over the pools which have been drained over the gutter, and it also receives the soot. Soot means black colored powder, like substance, black powder like substance, soot, and it also receives soot on its back from the chimneys, and after slipping and taking sudden leap, it sink in slumber. It fall asleep. It falls asleep. This cat falls asleep. It sinks in slumber in the soft October night by curling about the house. It curls about the house. So in the same way as the movements of the cats, the movements of the fog is described in a single statement. If I say it, then the fog is spread from over the house from part to part, just like a cat who is wandering from place to place and at last sleep. So in the same way, this fog is spread from part to part of the house. So this is what the explanation, this is what Prufrock observes in his surroundings. And here if we take the meaning, if we understand, interpret it more, then we can also see that Prufrock, that this image of yellow fog, this image of yellow fog is showing Prufrock that in the light, that he is not more inclined, or he is more inclined to sleep. He is more inclined to sleep, fell asleep. He is more inclined to sleep than to be up and doing something, to go somewhere or do something, or to pose an overwhelming question. He is more inclined to sleep, which shows and these up to here, these all the images like evening as patient, streets as argument, fog as cat are reflecting Prufrock's passivity. And his surroundings also seem to be in tune with him. So all these things are showing that Prufrock and his surroundings are indulging in a restless rest. They are in a restless rest. Next. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. Now here Prufrock is saying, yes, indeed there is enough time, or there is no hurry. There is enough time for the yellow smoke that moves along the street and rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time, there will be time, there will be certainly enough time. Prufrock is saying that there is enough time. So this repetition is also showing that Prufrock doesn't want to take any decision. He is very indecisive and he doesn't want to take any decision. So in this way, there is enough time, there will be time. He just postpones the issues. He just postpones the matters, whatever he faces. So there will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet, to be ready, or to prepare oneself to meet others, to meet the friends. There is enough time. There will be time to murder and create. There is certainly enough time to murder and the act of creation. Even if one has to murder, then also there is enough time. So there, from big to low, there is enough time. Any task, any action, there is enough time to ponder over. And time for all the works and days of works, and time for all the works. So there is enough time for all the works which is related to daily routine, and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. And there is enough time to prepare a question and put it on the plate. Now this line also indicates that Prufrock is prepared just for a question. He is not ready to answer. This also again showing his indecisiveness, that he is just ready to put a question, to pose a question, but not ready for the answer, or not ready to give any answer. Time for you and time for me, as he is addressing his companion, that there is enough time for you as well as for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. And there is enough time because there is enough time for taking 100 indecisions, and we can revise them again and again. So these lines also shows that Prufrock's daily routine is summed up in these 100 indecisions, visions, and revisions. His daily routine is summed up in these activities only. And in taking these 100 indecisions, visions, and revisions, what he has to labor. So how he relieves his labor, how he gets relief from this heavy labor? He gets relief by taking toast and tea. So before the taking of a toast and tea, by taking toast and tea, he gets relief from this labor of taking indecisions, visions, and revisions. So this is what this excerpt or this text, in this text, Prufrock is saying. The next, in the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Now, these are the repeated lines as a refrain in this poem, and these are being repeated, and it is also drawing our attention that this room is the Prufrock's mind, where women come and go, who have nothing to do much in his mind. They just come and go, like in a very leisurely fashion. They just come and go. And these women, talking of about a great art and culture like Michelangelo, it also shows that it also, and here what Prufrock wants to say, or the Eliot wants to say, that these women doesn't know or doesn't have deep interest in art and culture, but they pose, that they present themselves in a very cultured light, as they belong to very sophisticated society, so they present themselves in a very high cultured light. So that's why they are talking of Michelangelo, despite knowing much about his art and his creativity. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Now Prufrock is continuing in his ruminations. He is saying that indeed there is enough time, there will be time, because he feels that there should be time when I can wonder, or I should wonder that if I have courage to make a proposal, to make a marriage proposal, if I have courage, because he feels that he has to muster up courage in order to propose his lady love. He has to muster up courage, and this will take quite some time. This will take some time. So he's saying there will be time to when I can wonder that whether I should declare my love or not. Do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair. So here he is saying that he has he feels that as the right moment comes, he may lose his courage and he may turn back. And while he's turning back, by going downstairs, he will descend the stair, he will go downstairs. The people might, there is a possibility that the people might see the or this action of going downstairs will disclose the bald spot in the middle of his hair, which is also symbolizing his cowardice. This bald spot is also a symbol of his cowardice, where he is descending the stair, and people come to know about that there is a bald spot in the middle of his hair. And what will they comment? They will comment about his appearance. They will comment how his hair is growing thin. So it is a just direct comment about his growing age, about his aging, that how his hair is growing thin. So he is in that way very less confident in this way, as he is aging, as he is becoming old. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest but asserted by a simple pin. So here Prufrock is saying that I may appear good by appearing at my best in my morning coat, and in his mounting and firm and stiff collar, in his fine and rich necktie, which is fixed up by a simple but noteworthy pin. He tries to appear good in his morning coat with all these accessories, but he knows it that people will deride his middle-aged looks, despite of his attempts of hiding his aging by dressing them himself fashionably. People will deride it. So here we can see that Prufrock is conscious of the fact that he is becoming old, and that's why he is becoming more and more indecisive and timid. As he is saying, they will surely notice his thin arms and legs, and they will comment, but how his arms and legs are thin. So in such circumstance, do I dare? Do I dare disturb the universe? So again, Prufrock is reiterating here that the question is that do I dare? Do I take this further and disturb the universe? As for him, the proposing the lady or making a marriage proposal is as big as, or making a marriage proposal along with its reception, that how will she responds to him. This proposal is as big issue as the disturbance of the universe itself, as he feels that it will create a lot of upheaval in his whole life. In a minute there is a time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. So here again he is stressing over his indecisiveness, that he has a long experience, and his experience has taught him that due to his ever changing mind, he can take decision in a minute and then revise it, and in the very next moment he can cancel it, and he can reverse that same decision which he has taken a moment earlier. So in this way he has many decisions and revisions and then reversals of those decisions, which also reflects his great indecisiveness. And next, now here in these lines, Prufrock seems to disclosing that why is he so indecisive, why is he so timid and covered in telling, and why is he so irresolute, as he has presented himself in a so irresolute light. And he seems that he is such an irresolute person for whom the simplest decision or is, if he takes a simple decision, then also it is a matter of big strain, speculation and distress for him. So now here he is quite a little we can find the revelation that why is he so indecisive, why is he so irresolute. For I have known them all already, as he is saying that I have known them. I have known these old ladies already. I have known them, and they are known to me as have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons, as I have known them in the daily parties and social gatherings, as I have spent my whole life. As in the next line we can see, I have measured out my life with coffee spoons, as I have spent my whole life in making and drinking coffee in the parties. So as he's saying that his life is measured not in terms of actions but by the doses of the coffee. Or it can be said that his life is around or we can say his life is just a monotonous round of drinking coffee with the same set of people, just monotonous so many rounds he has in, and that's what all his life is, with the same set of people. That's why these all people are known to him, and that is the problem, because he knows them, and he knows that what they think about him, about Prufrock. I know, and he also asserts, I know the voices dying with the dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. And he is asserting that that he knows, that he is familiar with the voices of the singer who is singing in the next room, and he appreciates that music, because of its dying fall, because of its dying cadence, which is a very declining rhythmic flow, because it suits the mood of this music, suits with the mood of Prokofiev. So that's why he appreciates it and he is familiar with that music too. So how should I presume? So in such circumstance, when he knows everybody knows him, it is the question that how can he dare to presume, dare to propose, or dare to make a proposal. So this is a big question for him now. How should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all. So here he is further continuing that he knows, even he's saying he remembers that sharp and pitiless gaze of the ladies, as these ladies know his true character. He feels that these ladies are gazing him so pitilessly, as they are telling that we know your true character. And that's why how can he in such a condition, in such a under such circumstance, how can he blurt out the secret longing of his hearts under such pitiless gazes? And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, and he is saying that these eyes gaze him in such a way as they are measuring all the limits of his capacities. In that sense, that they are measuring all the limits of his capacities, they fix him. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin? So he is saying that they fix him in such a way and in such a condition, when these ladies gaze him pitilessly, stares him in such a gaze that he finds himself in a pathetic predicament of a poor worm, just like a poor worm who is put to wall by a sharp pinpoint, and who is wriggling, who is twisting and turning painfully on the wall. So in the same way, he also finds, just like that poor worm sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, who is wriggling, who is painfully wriggling on the wall. Then, and under such circumstance, how can I be so presumptuous to say my intentions, to say my proposal, to spit out all the but ands of my days and ways? So here he's saying that by allowing these people to judge me, by allowing these people to make my as many as versions as their definitions, by allowing this, he has extinguished his life, just like the bits of the smoked cigarette, which we call butt ends. Just like the bits of the smoked cigarette, he has extinguished his life in doing so by my days and ways, as everybody knows him in a in their own way. So to spit out, as butt ends are thrown away, in the same way he has lost his existence, he has lost the meaning of his existence by allowing others to define his very personality. And here these butt ends also presenting the triviality of Prokofiev, which composes his personality and his lifestyle. And how should I presume? Now here again he is posing this dilemma, that under such circumstance, when these ladies gaze me in such a pitiless manner, where they make me feel that they know my true character and I know them, how can I be courageous enough to tell my true intentions? How can I be bold enough to make a proposal to my lady love? So with this, and here I am winding up this session, and we will continue this poem in the next lecture. Thank you for now.